The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, Lord. At that time, Jesus said to his disciples, "In those days, after that great tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away before all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But of the day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son of Man, but only the Father." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise be to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
From the readings we have just listened to, it rather paints a gloomy picture. It rather gives an impression that today we are all here to hear about bad news. Rather, the message today is one of hope and promises in the midst of doom and gloom. The readings today calls us back to a fundamental trust and reliance upon God as a cornerstone of all our life and our life together. They remind us over and over again that the one who has promised is faithful. Clearly, the images in the first reading take the totality of the book of Daniel. What you get, the impression you have, is that of pain, is that of tribulation. It's like complete darkness. But then, far back then in the book of Daniel, we come across the fact that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. The images of destruction, calamities, end time in the first and the third reading today is to say, instead of wallowing in the uncertainties, in pain, rejoice. Jesus is coming. He is victorious. The totality of today's readings point us to tribulations and calamities. It appears we have bad news on a Sunday, a day that's supposed to be the day of the Lord. Why is it so? Jesus says we should watch out for three signs leading to this bad news, or the destruction of the temple, or the stronghold of our faith. His warnings are meant for the elect. His warnings are meant for those whom, in the third reading we heard, he will go to the ends of the earth. He is going to gather them. It throws back to the first reading where in the book of Daniel it says he's going to send Michael the archangel to go to collect this elect. So it is not in totality all bad. These readings are full of promises. But then his warnings are very clear. They are like the red lights or the red flag saying to us, watch it, dangers ahead. First of all, he says, beware. There are going to be fake prophets and false messiahs. They will mislead us. They will mislead you. Who are these false prophets? Who are these false messiahs? It hurts to wake up to sad news daily. Our media are saturated daily with calamities. In the last 28 hours or 48 hours, we know what has happened in France. We hear these daily. Here in our backyard in the northeastern part of Nigeria, although the media may not bring those graphic pictures to our homes, there are evils still being perpetrated by fake prophets. These fake prophets may strap themselves with all sorts of bombs. Yet there are other fake prophets who may not strap themselves. They dress like me. They wear three-piece coats. They sing. They stand and talk eloquently to mislead you, to mislead us. Jesus is saying, open your eyes. One of the Nigerian artists will say what? Shine your eyes. Jesus said it before Daddy Shoki ever came into reality. But the point that Jesus is making is that they are going to speak in his name. They are going to bring false promises. How can you say to someone who has never had a gainful employment that this year he is going to make it in Jesus' name? How can you say to someone who has medical condition, cancer, that it is going to disappear right now? How can you stand before people in the public and you tell them, raise your hands, keys of new cars will drop from the skies? Jesus is saying, beware of such false prophets. They take the Bible, they take the scriptures, they have fantastic words, they quote their languages, and present the same scripture differently, out of context, to mislead us. Jesus is warning that these men may not strap themselves with bombs. They may not carry guns visibly, but then they are making more destructions than those who strap themselves. They destroy families. They destroy homes. They ruin people's businesses. They lie to us to steal and come and give to them in the name of tithes. They open our eyes to those things that probably we close our eyes to, that it is possible to steal and give to God, and your sins are going to be wiped away. Christ is saying, these signs are with us. Be very careful. Next, he says, there will be plenty of calamities, wars, earthquake, famines. These appear all natural. But don't forget, you and I contribute to make nature reverse its course. We hear that the woods will bleed, stones will cry. They are happening. The earthquakes, when they go off, blood begin to flow. Christ is saying, how are we part of these calamities? nature aside, we heard, we read, the Pope cries out in his fantastic letter, the Laudato Si, where he calls each and every one of us to play a role in saving the world's climate. Christ said this long before Pope Francis became an altar boy. And again, Jesus is reminding us today that beware of these calamities. Nature alone may not conspire against us. We could be part of all that will make life miserable for all of us. Then the disciples of Jesus shall be persecuted. Now, let's have a throwback to the first reading, where we heard there was a promise that St. Michael the Archangel would be on hand. It is to prepare people like you, people like me, that will be so punished by false prophets, false messiahs, these calamities, that angel will be there for us in times of our needs. But then he's saying to his disciples, as he's saying to us today, you may stand erect, you may be steadfast, you may do your best, you may reject all these poisonous theologies, you may reject these twisted ideologies that are likely to mislead you. Hey, you are going to be persecuted. You are going to suffer for that position that you have taken. And Christ is saying to you, if you have never rejected those things that are unwholesome, you are not mine yet. If you have never voted against anything that is contrary to calling you my son, you are not my disciple yet. If you have never stood against anything unjust, if you have never stood against anything that is immoral, Christ is saying, the elect that I'm going to go around to collect, be careful, you may not be part of it. But then he says, there's something that's going to happen. If you are in this frame, if you belong to this group, you are going to suffer. Now, this suffering may not necessarily come from somebody too far away from you. It can start right from your household. It can start from your best friend. It starts from your blood. And Christ is saying, when that persecution comes, remember, I told you. Before the angels will go around, beware of these traps that are likely to be part of the false prophets he spoke about. But then, in what seems to be a hopeless situation, there is hope. Bad news, real bad news, appears to be what the first and the third reading is all about. He says this is how it will happen. The abomination of the temple. Last Sunday, we're talking about how the scribes devoured the estate, devoured the common food that was meant for widows. Christ identified that the temple was already bleeding. The temple was already corrupt because the religious leaders were corrupt, just like the false messiahs, the false prophets who will speak in his name. He says to us, the temple that will be destroyed is going to impact on many people's faith. Of course, for those of us sitting down here, the temple may not be as significant to us as it was to the Jews that witnessed the destruction of the temple. It was their national treasury. It was that pulled them together. It was their national pride. It was that they stood for and they could die for. And when Jesus walked around it, and the disciples said to him, look at how well designed the marble stones, how they speak so eloquently about the architecture of the Jewish people, how it held the roots, the heritage of the Jewish people. Jesus laughed at them and said, in 3 days, what it took nearly 70 years to build, collecting all the materials from all parts of the world to form that national heritage, Jesus said, it was coming down in rubbles. Now, to attack people's roots like he did, to say that root is going to be cut, hurts. And Jesus is saying to you, this is how it's going to happen. Our roots are going to be cut. Our roots are going to be so devastated that our faith will be shaken. That all that we hold so dear to our hearts will melt. And Christ is saying, that will be the beginning of that calamity, that tribulation, that doom. It all looks bad. Jesus now uses powerful, violent images to say this. He says, the sun will shine at night. The sun shining at night. It's a reversal of nature. It's a change in our body system. What it means, humanly speaking, your body will ask you to sleep about that hour. But if the sunshine is too much, you can't sleep. So it's not just sun being affected. The whole ecosystem is going to be affected. Jesus says, this is how it's going to happen. Now, is it? It is. Bombs are going up every night. Our skylines are lit every day with horrors. What happened in France in the last couple of hours is an example. We saw vehicles running around in the name of ambulance, police, lighting the skylines. Jesus is saying this is going to happen. Nights will become like day. Many men and women probably didn't sleep all through the night that the theaters were bombed, the stadium were bombed, restaurants were blown to pieces. Nearly 130 people lost their lives just because of some individuals with twisted ideology, speaking for God, being prophets, being messiahs. Christ is saying, just one day, the night becomes like daytime. Another image of the destruction that is likely to come. The bad news is that the moon will be like the day. The moon will be like the day. So there is contrast that should shake and make all of us to bow our heads and think, where am I? When all this is going to happen, what account will I give? Where will I be? Then another image, he said, blood will flow from trees. Blood will flow from trees. And stones will shout. Blood flowing from trees instead of sap, instead of nectar to make our honey. Buildings that have stood the test of time, that held history, that held people's life, are brought down with bombs. Christ is saying these are negative signs. Even within these images, it appears all gloom. But then, these bad news themselves are good news. They are. For anyone listening to it, it's like, why should I trust a God that cannot control what he has created? Did God create these things and absconded? Why is it that he's not intervening? Why do we have to pray? Why do I have to trust that God that cannot help me? But the point Jesus is making today, the point the author of the book of Mark is making today, by bringing this text to us, is that these bad news are signs of something better. These images that come across as a bit making us feel low. Jesus is saying, I meant to reveal myself to you. I want to show you something different. I want to make you see end time has meaning. Those bad times you are going through, they have meanings. Whatever difficult situation you find yourself today, I am still by you. And he says, they are signs of hope that he, Jesus, has come to redeem all that is making us upset, to change violent chaos to calm, destructions to wholeness, the old disorder to a new world order. He's doing this in various ways. He's using people like you who go on your knees to ask that things could get better for people in Iraq, for people in Syria, for those who are fleeing war conflict zones. He's using world leaders to sit down to ask themselves question, why are these things happening right under our watch? Christ is saying to you, this bad news themselves, they could just appear as hyperchance. They could appear as man-made. But I am choosing people from among you to begin to work to avoid future calamities. You may ask. Yesterday I saw on the byline one of the news media saying that the Pope says the attack in France, these upheavals, is sign of the Third World War. Sign of the Third World War. If you ask me, I will change it. I will say it's a sign of the First Tribal War. Because what they call World War for me is a tribal war. It belongs to Europe and all the rest. But then, the point the Pope is drawing our attention is that this fire is just burning everybody. Many of us first sad watching the news outlets tell us that people went to eat at the restaurant. They never went back home. Many people in Europe use football as a rite of passage. A parent could have taken his son, who is of age, to go and watch football for the first time, to watch the German-French match yesterday. Probably got killed in the process in an attempt to introduce his child into adulthood. Christ is saying to us, yes, they look so deadly. Blood is flowing. Fantastic buildings have been reduced to rubble. These are signs that I have come to change that. These are signs that, yes, I am the Redeemer. The promise I made, I will not go back on them. Christ is saying, all that is happening will lead us to a new Genesis. There will be a new hope. He, Christ, is the hope. St. Paul sums it up this way. He says, the old world has gone away. A new world is already born. But why? Why? Jesus wants us to recognize our weaknesses, our frailty, our fragility, our dependence on God. Man hails himself as a new God and rejects moral values. I'm not too sure where I found this. Even in our country, Nigeria, they are asking us to drop moral ethics from our schools. Just teach history of religion. Why? Because they feel faith schools are divisive. Teaching one faith or the other in school has not helped united Nigeria. It has rather divided us. Why? Because man thinks he's the new God. America and the other civilized world decided to throw the Bible, throw religion out of their schools and replace them with guns. Daily we hear young people with mental health issues go to school armed with guns, kill their friends, kill their teachers, wipe out a whole generation because man thinks he has it all. Jesus is saying, these are the reasons why I want you to recognize that in all that is happening, you are weak. You need to depend on me. And that is why anytime you pray for a change, it's a recognition of your weakness. It's a recognition of your dependence on God. Man speaks of constructing the world and kicks God out of the construction. Many of the buildings today that we see have signs and marks of the evil one. How is it that most of our edifices today, public places, don't have spots for prayers? Some countries are beginning to realign themselves to that fact that public spaces, buildings should have a place for God. Our airports are beginning to display that. Some other countries use market squares, shopping malls to build chapels. And I hope we can copy that, because Christ is saying, you may build whatever you want to build, no matter how beautiful they are. The destruction that these things can bring is that you must, if you don't put God in the middle of it, you are losing the point. For those of us who design our roads, for those of us who are involved in thinking it out, I am lucky to have been to a village where, for instance, every 50 kilometers, there is a spot left out for people to stop by and pray. I have found myself in a village or in a collection of villages where the next village linking the other, there is an altar where the Blessed Sacrament is reposed. On your journey, you have the liberty, you have the luxury of actually stopping by and spending quality time with God, your Creator. Our Muslim brothers challenge us Christians sometimes when we travel with them in public transports. They stop. They spread out their mats. In an event when they don't have a mat, they make do with the ordinary floor to kowtow to say their prayers. This is the point Jesus is making today. That indeed, we may think that through the constructions we make, we are defeating God. If you kick him out, what you are bringing on yourself? Pain, miseries. Next, man claims to have conquered the cosmos and questions the Creator. We can fly anywhere. We can touch the skies. We can go to the moon. Every attempt is being made to penetrate the sun. In an attempt of doing this, some people are still saying there is no God. And Christ is saying, listen, if you don't depend on me, you may see the sun as beautiful as it is. The radiance of that sun will never allow you to come close by. You need to show some respect to the Creator. But man in his selfishness has put us all in the pain, in the misery we all go through. Man today builds towers and empires and calls them new heaven and says no eternity. The Twin Towers, the Dubais, they reclaim the whole sea and begin to show human dexterity on how human architecture can put homes on water. Christ is saying, beautiful as they are, I gave you the intelligence. I gave you all it takes to do that. But am I still in it? If I am not in it, you are looking for trouble. Because they will turn back to haunt you. Same as those of us who build our homes where we live. How many of us bring Christ into our homes? In times past, when you visit a Catholic home, at the entrance, you have a water font where you can dip your hand and bless yourself in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Some of us are too ashamed to leave those water fountains in front of our houses. Some of us are too ashamed to even display the crucifix to make Christ the center of our homes. Christ is saying, I have come to redeem all your excesses. But if you still want to kick me out, well, remember, I am still out there waiting for you. When you are ready to open your door to welcome me in, I will walk in. But I will always have you in the palm of my hands. Now, to say that I have you in the palms of my hands, Sometimes we reject this call, and that is when things begin to fall. Planes drop down. Man sits down and constructs devices that will bring down over 224 people flying and returning back to their homeland. Suddenly, the sea begins to break its bank, sweeps people away, sweeps homes away, sweeps properties away. Christ is saying, those times you reject me, these are signs that you have not acknowledged me as the creator and the one who has put everything together. Pains will all be there. Human beings will begin to go into depression. They feel there is a black hole in their lives. Hopelessness pervades the land. War. Family against each other. Nations preparing for war. Isn't it funny that there are people who have brothers and sisters in the same geographical environment? Children from the same womb, they don't talk to each other. People from the next neighborhood, they don't see eye to eye. It is because we have rejected him. And in rejecting him, he's saying, what you are seeing are signs for you to come back to me. They are not bad news. So when people construct bombs to kill each other, they are bad in themselves, but they are reminding you that, listen, something is wrong. Something is not right. There is something going on between you, my children, that you should sit down and talk and make a difference. And when that fails, man becomes hopeless, broken, and uncertain. That is when we begin to worry about everything. That is when you begin to worry, why is this man living a hopeless life? Why is this Christian making a journeyless journey to Christ? Why is this pilgrim just on the same spot, not making any effort spiritually? Now, like I said, God has chosen men and women like you to help solve human problems. People going through difficult times are always more likely to identify with such languages as we saw in the first reading and in the book of Mark. Professors Anthony Scully and Henry Biller identify 9 types of hopelessness man slips into in bad times. 9 forms of hopelessness. Man slips into them just as well as a nation. So, first of all, when man feels alienated, man feels like somehow he is different. A country feels the same way. He feels as if he has been cut out from the system. He doesn't have a sense of belonging. Christ is saying to us, when that happens, when hopelessness pervades our land, it's a sign of the end time. Next is the fact that how is such person who feels alienated, who feels cut off, who feels pushed away? Christ is saying it is a role of each of us to make that person feel welcome. There is a word which psychologists will use, which is attachment. We need to get that person close by, let him feel that sense of being, not being pushed away, no longer feeling the sense of belonging. The next sense of loneliness is this fact that some of us feel that forsakenness. Man feels totally abandoned, feels alone in times of the greatest need. When he needs you more, you are not there. He becomes like Job in the Old Testament, infested with all sorts of calamities, all sorts of pains, all sorts of worries. Christ is saying this level of hopelessness is not just about some of us. Nations go through the same thing, where they feel abandoned by everybody. They are going through drought. Their fields refuse to produce anything because for years the lands have been degraded, but nobody comes to their help. Each of us can feel that sense of hopelessness. Christ is saying to us, these are signs. But then, I have sent people who are saying, you may feel that sense of hopelessness. Some people should get closer to them. Let them have a sense of survival. The next is that there are people feeling hopeless. They feel uninspired. Man feels undervalued, lacking an opportunity to progress, regrets not having someone to look up to. He becomes a minority in the midst of many. This brings clearly the story of our young people. Research in the last couple of years show that our young people who went to universities, well certificated, the bottom line is that they are unemployable. No more inspiration. Nothing to make them feel, I can do something. Therefore, that sense of hopelessness. What happens? Drive through our streets. Young, able-bodied young men and women are there hawking little items. The next minute, they make some good money. They buy 2 mobile phones or 3. Why do you need 2 or 3 mobile phones? When your age mate is sitting in some lab, sitting in some underground garage, writing codes, writing application. Our young people are busy buying and changing mobile phones. They need to be inspired. That hopelessness must go away. And Christ is saying, if you listen to me, you as a nation must provide for these young people so that they can have something to aspire and inspire for. Some of us, feeling hopeless, feel powerless. This is my situation. Psychologists are saying to us, hey, even though you feel hopeless, don't remain there. You may feel powerless. There is some positive energy in you. Bring it out. But then it cannot come out if you feel that hopelessness. Man suddenly feels that incapability when he feels alienated, the first one. But then, the powerlessness can be powerful. And Christ is saying, I'm revealing this to you on a Sunday like this. I'm showing you to say that there are Michaels who are going from the north, from the west, from the south, looking for men and women who feel powerless, who feel hopeless, that I can give them something to do. There are those who feel hopeless. They feel because they are hopeless, they are oppressed. They feel pressed down. They feel crushed under the weight of uncertainty. They may not ascribe to any of the aforementioned, but the fact is that they feel they are just taking the wrong end of the bargain. Therefore, they remain where they are. Christ is saying, men and women who found themselves in an oppressive environment should not remain that way. We owe them some responsibility. And that is why today, that end time languages used or images used is to remind us of people like these in our midst who feel the sense of oppression. Some feel they are limited because he has failed. He lacks the inner energy. He's deficient. He starts a business. It falls apart. He puts his hands in any other thing. They don't work. He starts a relationship. Within few weeks, it falls apart. And therefore, they just fall back and say, I cannot go it anymore. I give up. Christ is saying, indeed, it looks like a bad thing. It looks like a calamity. But I'm saying to you, that is something positive. You may feel hopeless in that situation. In your hopelessness, rise. And there should be people who should be masters to help them out of their situation to survive the limitedness they feel. The worst part of it is that feeling sense of doom. Man is weighed down by a form of despair that I am dead. Some people who have this problem wouldn't even want to leave their homes. Countries who have this kind of problems wouldn't want to open their doors to other countries to allow fresh air coming, to allow their people have some benefits. They get closed in. Christ is saying, when you feel this sense of doom, this sense of hopelessness, indeed it looks like a calamity, there is sign of hope there for you. There are other means in which you can survive. Next, those who feel captives, they are slaves. They feel that emotionally they cannot be better. Some, either because they belong to some group, they get institutionalized. Prisoners, for instance, because they are captives, they can be physically constrained not to feel the sense of hope of one day leaving the prison. Some people who feel emotionally trapped will feel, I cannot do it anymore. I can't start a relationship. I can't start friendship. This man wanted to marry me. He disappointed me. I'm not going to marry anymore. This lady disappointed me after investing so much in her education. I am not going to marry anymore. I tried to become a priest. I was kicked out of the seminary. I am not going to church anymore. We get ourselves imprisoned this way. And Christ is saying, don't remain that way. It is not a hopeless situation. It's saying, change your direction. Change your way of doing things. Change the way you manage your relationship. And the right man or the right woman will come into the horizon. Next, those who feel sense of helplessness. These are individuals who no longer believe that they can live safely in the world. They feel exposed. They feel vulnerable. They feel naked. They feel there's nothing about them that anybody can do. If anybody is feeling helpless, Christ is saying there are people around who have all it takes to help them pull through. And those are the Michaels. Those are the angels he promised in the book of Daniel. Now, if we tie all these 9 hopelessness together, which today's reading brought to us, what is the meaning? What do we take? The end time has meaning. End time for those who are hopeless. However, for those who feel more secure in their situation, end time may mean very little to them. The end of the world is not popular and nothing to worry about. That is a group who feel they don't belong to the 9 description of those who are hopeless. Life is okay. They are comfortable in their skin. They are comfortable in their world. But then, Christ is saying, even those who feel comfortable, even those who think they are hopeful, end time has meaning because time itself rubs on them. The end of times concerns all of us. If we share the experiences of those who are internally displaced in this country, refugees fleeing from Syria, for instance, or from the northeastern part of Nigeria, or any other group of people who are experiencing great suffering, let us be aware that our life will come to an end someday. That will be our own end time. It is perhaps in pondering about death that apocalypse or apocalyptic images resonate with everyone. Whether you are comfortable in your skin, whether you are comfortable in your place of work, or you are a man full of hope, when it comes to issue of death, there is value in end time. The end of times is again relevant to all of us when we think we are only pilgrims. We are passing through this world. This world is not our home. We are going to leave signs on the sands of time. Christ is saying, end time will have meaning for you. Because knowing that when you pass through this world, if you did not leave a positive mark, your end time ends. Your end time continues if the mark you leave behind, others are able to make meaning out of it. Because end time has meaning. When existence ends, life continues, and which is another promise we got in the book of Daniel. For the first time in the whole of Old Testament, it is only when we are talking about the end time that Daniel drew our attention to the fact of resurrection. Because he wants to draw our attention that end time is not empty. End time has meaning. End time is going to end in the Creator himself. The end of times resonates with the hopeless, with people who go through uncertainties and fears. But hope shines. Then too, he will send angels to gather his chosen from the four winds, from the ends of the world to the ends of heaven. Mark 13:27. That is the promise. That is where Daniel nailed it for us. That is for the first time where Daniel revealed to us in the whole of the Old Testament the fact that the resurrection is here and that is coming. The message of hope, which is what today's Sunday is about. It's not about calamities. It's not about pains. It's not about frustration. It's not about hopelessness. It's not, I can't do it. Today is the day Christ says to us, there is hope. There's silver lining in the sky. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Mark and Daniel were in fact announcing a message of hope in today's reading. That wickedness, injustice, and persecution, they said, were about to come to an end. And in their place will arise a kingdom of justice and peace. In today's first reading, we find the earliest evidence of belief in everlasting life in the resurrection of the dead in the Old Testament. So, for Christ to come, and we celebrate him today, for us to have the kind of bad news we have, we heard Daniel points us to this fact that in all that may happen to us, if we are men and women of faith, if we are men and women who stand to be counted, to reflect the reality of the values of the gospel, we are certain to enjoy this message of hope. For all those suffering from the 9 hopeless situations we discussed some minutes ago and think that nothing seems to change, Mark and Daniel teach that no labor is going to go in vain. No fear, no tear, no pain, no sacrifice will be lost. All shall come together because every experience has meaning. As well as our own faithfulness will speed up the coming of a new world, and we too will share in the joy of the kingdom of God. So, if we cooperate, quickly things will come to pass. If we cooperate, hopelessness will give way to hope. If we cooperate, the false messiahs will lose their trades. If we cooperate, those who are claiming to be God's spokesmen and women will no longer have a place to display their wares because we turn our back against them. We say to them, we reject your twisted ideology. For those times, our young people who take refuge because they are hopeless, life has no meaning, they take arms against the state. They take arms against institutions. They take arms against their own very self. Christ is saying, That can come to an end if we cooperate. He says, do not be alarmed. How calming that can be when we have just talked about destructions, when we have seen Syria being leveled by man-made devices, when we see human beings being brought down flying, 200 and over dying within seconds, when men and women will arm themselves to kill or stab each other. Christ is saying, do not be alarmed when you hear of wars and rumors of wars. Another consoling word, he says, do not be alarmed when nations rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Do not be alarmed. Do not be alarmed when there are earthquakes in various places, and if there is hunger in the land or famine. Definite hope should remain. We should be men and women of hope. Naming the terror remains. Obama is already gathering some other people to talk about what had happened in France. Let's name the terrors. They may be there. But if we are men and women of faith who know that there's meaning in what is happening, we will subdue them. Jesus changing the thinking of the negative picture we painted today from the book of Daniel and Mark. All the upheavals and all that is happening, he changes them with the fact that he made a promise that the punishment that he's going to give to evil men and women will be harsh. Will be harsh. But then, there's a promise for the rest of us who are called the elect. That man or woman who has suffered, that man and woman who has gone through all this pain, that man and woman who has been displaced from his home. Christ is saying, you, that man, you are an elect. The IDPs in Abuja, Christ is saying to them, they are the elect. I'm going to send my angels. You are going through a lot of torments, a lot of suffering. I am going to send angels round the earth to gather you, and you shall be with me. Jesus changed the thinking of all sorts of upheavals, not just to make the point that he is going to draw him to himself, but to remind each of us of his presence and that we should depend on him for all that we want. The violent images, heartbreaking languages we hear today is only to stress the shout of victory, of hope that Jesus is coming. In the next few Sundays, we shall be celebrating Advent, when we shall be preparing ourselves for the time Christ will reveal himself to us. Christ is saying, this is the message I want to prepare you with. Last 2 months, last 3 months, you've gone through all sorts of stress, depressive acts, failures. People have let you down. Things have not worked properly. He's saying, the end of that is coming. I'm not making empty promises, but cooperate with me. Do what I ask you to do as my son and my daughter. What seems to plague you daily, I am there to support you. Then we hear of the big divine idea that Jesus will gather all the elect from all the corners of the earth, which includes the IDPs, like I said, and those of us who are going through hard times or who have gone through hard times. New life shall spring from the fig trees. He is near at the gates. And that prepares or opens us to the preparation for Christmas. Hope of a new world, a new northeastern Nigeria, a new Niger Delta, a new Syria, a new Iraq, a new state of Palestine, of Israel, all living together in peace. Christ's message of hope for us today is, I am. I am, because I said it. I am because the hope you don't have. I am the hope. I am because you are hopeless. Your situation shouldn't be the way it is if you cooperate with me. I will be there for you. But I am, because I am the one who made promises and I don't fail. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words will not pass away. That means hope alive. And here is the punchline. The small facts in today's readings, the small facts, the irrelevant ones, are the ones, the question the disciple asked. When? When? When will this happen? When will I become hopeful? When will my situation change? When will my dryness become fresh? When will the wars end? When shall we hear less or complete silence of bombs and guns? When shall the earthquakes stop? When shall floods cease? When shall the fields grow? These are the tiny, small questions. And Jesus says what? Zip it. Zip it. I don't know. Forget it. And the big picture is what Mark says. Just be what? Beware. Watch it. Keep alert. And keep awake. May the good Lord help us in our moments of dryness, in our moments of difficulties, through Christ our Lord.